Welcome back to the Boogie Mansion. And if you've been here for a while, I'm sure that Ever After High is a show that needs no introduction. But I'll give you one anyway. Released as a sister show to Monster High in 2013, Ever After High is a series that centers around the sons and daughters of famous fairy tale characters going to school to follow their destinies. You've got Raven Queen, the daughter of the evil queen who doesn't want to be anything like her mom, and Applewhite, the daughter of Snow White, who very much wants Raven to be evil. The show ran from 2013 until its cancellation in 2016, and in that time, 7 specials were made. I'd like to rank them all and give my thoughts on them. Now you might be thinking, 7 specials? Weren't there only 5? Technically, yeah, Legacy Day and True Hearts Day aren't full specials like the rest, but I still wanted to include them anyway because I wanted to group everything together. For the ranking of the specials themselves, remember it's all just my opinion. Though I am trying to be more specific in my criticisms this time around compared to my Monster High ranking, they're still subjective to my experiences and personal taste. So if I like a special that you dislike, or vice versa, that's totally cool. Feel free to voice it in the comments, but of course keep it chill. With that being said, let's start from the bottom. This bottom placement may be a bit of a surprise to some, as there's a special that many more people were probably expecting to be at the bottom. But Spring Unsprung has always been my least favorite Ever After High special. To recap, the plot of the special follows new characters Alistair Wonderland and Bunny Blanc coming to Ever After High after finding the real storybook of Legends in Wonderland. But the Cheshire Cat, Kitty's mom, has swapped the book for an evil spell book that almost plunges Ever After into ruin. At the same time, Gingerbread House, the daughter of the Candy Witch, is looking for a special ingredient for the Spring Ferris baking competition, water from the Well of Wonder. She ends up falling through the well and meeting the White Knight, who helps her to warn the characters back in Ever After about the Cheshire Cat's scheme. At the same time, Kitty Cheshire is pulling pranks on her friends, and they tell her that she needs to stop. But will she? I don't know. Whoa. Before I get to the negatives with this special, I'll start off positive. The topsy-turvy versions of Apple and Daring were a treat to watch. From the start of the show, these two have always been heralded as the perfect example of what royals should be like, so to see the brave, daring Charming reduced to a cowardly fool was pretty funny. And similarly, Goody Two-Shoes always following the rules Apple becoming a villain was pretty cool too. I have my problems with the topsy-turvy spell that I'll talk about later, but I enjoyed these two. Definitely better than the rest.
Ashlyn? Believe it!
I like that the special began to give more characterization to Lizzie Hartz. Before this point, she only really seemed crazy, constantly saying,
Off with the head!
I loved it, of course, but it's nice that we get to learn she has a passion for fashion. Rhyme. This special also introduces us to Brooke Page, the daughter of the 2 narrators, and she's great. She feels like an audience insert, but in a good way, and you can tell she cares a lot about the characters, just like us. I like that she gets to interfere with the story a little, continuing the tradition of breaking traditions, key to Ever After High's message.
I'm sorry, I have to do this. Maddie, Ginger baked a message for you in a pie. It's somewhere in the tea shop. Hurry! Thank you, young narrator.
And I almost forgot to mention him, but the Mad Hatter gets introduced in this special, and he's great. Him and Maddie probably have one of, if not the best, parental relationship in the series, so that's awesome. Good for Maddie. That's all my positives on the special out of the way, so let's move on to the negatives. To me, Spring Unsprung really lacks the emotional core that the other specials have. Most other entries in the series all had really personal and interpersonal conflicts driving the story. Legacy Day had Raven grappling with whether to follow her destiny and be unhappy, or rebel and carve out a path for herself. True Hearts Day had Ashlyn and Hunter struggling with being in love and losing the good graces of their friends, or breaking up to maintain sticking with tradition. This conflict also made Apple learn that there were holes in her ideology of destiny over everything else, holes that would continue to be poked in her viewpoint in Thronecoming. Thronecoming also has Briar dealing with her destiny of having to sleep for 100 years and realizing that's not really what she wants to do. These conflicts not only gave you something to think about and engage with as an audience member, but also seeing the characters' struggles made me root for them and be even more happy when they succeeded. Yeah, we get real analytical with these shows meant to sell plastic to little girls, but with Spring Unsprung, I just don't feel that same connection. The topsy-turvy spell, while it creates some funny alternate versions of characters, removes the agency of the characters it affects, which makes the conflict not very personal. It also leads to some kinda cringy moments, like Raven saying to Apple,
This isn't you, Apple.
I've just got the most wicked idea.
which just felt really melodramatic. The film seemingly sets up Kitty Cheshire to be the central character of focus. Kitty's conflict in this film is reconciling her desire for her mom's approval by pranking people and keeping her friends. She pranks people throughout the film and gets confronted by her friends telling her to stop. The special, at least to me anyway, seemed to set up an arc of Kitty realizing, oh, I should probably stop seeking out my mom's approval and my relationship with my mom is kind of unhealthy. But instead, while she does end up defying her mother's expectations of her in the end, she still ends up getting that approval anyway, and none of that's really acknowledged. I would have preferred if that arc went a different direction, and it just ended up feeling really disappointing to me because of that. Another problem I have with Spring Unsprung is that it's kind of unfocused. The story swaps between the topsy-turvy spell shenanigans, stuff with Kitty's mom, stuff with Ginger, and the Wonderlandians so much that it doesn't really feel like it's grounded in any specific main character at any point. The newly introduced characters in this film don't get much to latch onto either. Ginger goes to Wonderland and gives the warning message to the group about the topsy-turvy spell, but beyond that, there's not much else she does, though her talking into the pie was pretty funny.
So what do I do? Do I just start talking?
And of course, I can forgive the film not doing much with the White Knight, because that was more so set up for a later special, but Alistair and Bunny don't have much going on, and I get annoyed by their awkward romantic moments. Bro, please, just enough. Last bit of critique before I move on. I don't like how this special ignores Briar's end of things after what happened in Thronecoming. At the end of that special, Briar threw the storybook of legends down the Well of Wonder, but this special has it show up again. Do we get to see what Briar thinks about that? Not really. The most her reactions amount to are some concerned glances in the background. And I know this will be acknowledged in Way 2 Wonderland, but that's a whole other can of worms. She did join Raven, Cerise, and Holly in trying to stop Apple though, but okay, that wasn't the last bit of criticism. The whole Stop Apple squad felt really incompetent. I know that Raven didn't have the greatest grasp on her magic by this point, but for her to just sit back and let evil Apple plug the Well of Wonder made her look kinda bad. Cerise too, actually. We've seen Cerise run really fast before. I mean, that's kind of her whole thing, is being part wolf. So all the girls just standing there and being like, Apple, no, stop, made them look really, really stupid. Overall, I don't really like Spring Unsprung that much. It feels unfocused in terms of a central character and plot, and the arc that they tried to give Kitty didn't feel very satisfying. This didn't feel like the best follow-up to Thronecoming and probably would have benefited from another draft, but I guess it set up things for Way 2 Wonderland well enough. For those reasons, I have Spring Unsprung at the bottom of this list. I bet some of you expected this to be at the bottom, didn't you? Nah, but for real though, Epic Winter is probably the most unanimously hated thing in Ever After High, well besides the show being cancelled. And I can understand why. It was the last special to come out before the brand's untimely demise, and rather than focusing on the core characters we've grown to love, it centered on an entirely new character in her arc. Quick recap, it's a hot summer at Ever After High, but at the freezing top of the world lives the Snow King and Queen and their daughter, Crystal Winter. Crystal thinks she's ready to rule, but her parents deem her too childish to inherit the throne. To further complicate events, two of the Snow King's servants, Jackie Frost and North Wind, use evil dust from the shards of the Evil Queen's mirror to corrupt the Snow King and Queen. Now under the influence of evil, the Snow King unleashes a massive blizzard on Ever After. It's up to Crystal Winter and her friends to defeat Jackie Frost and North Wind and save her father. Now to me, the choice to focus a film on characters other than Raven and Apple was a really good idea. While Raven and Apple are the main and probably most interesting characters of the show, there wasn't really much left to explore of their characters come this time in the series. The previous specials Way 2 Wonderland and Dragon Games had largely seen them complete their arcs, and while I feel there was potentially more to explore for Apple's side of things, I can't imagine what they do for Raven. So for the sake of avoiding retreading their character arcs, I was open to a shift in focus. After all, Ever After High has a really good cast of characters, so switching who they focus on wouldn't bother me too much. However, the problem comes with who they chose to focus on, Crystal Winter. I've watched Epic Winter twice, but through both times, I could never pin down why I didn't like Crystal until recently. The biggest problem I have with Crystal is that she's not characterized very well. Multiple times throughout the story, characters like Jackie Frost or the Snow King and Queen mention how Crystal is childish and not suited to rule.
Crystal isn't ready to rule. She won't be able to take the heat.
Life can't all be fun and games. One day, you will rule Winter.
There's a difference between understanding and doing.
But none of her actions really display that flaw at all. At the beginning of the movie, Crystal plays hockey with her dad, and her mother tells her that everything can't be all fun and games. But their hockey playing isn't really actually interrupting anything important at all. If Crystal had been shown to have messed up her royal duties because she was too busy goofing around, it would show how she's irresponsible and not ready for the throne yet. Instead, the only childish thing we see about Crystal is her not being able to tie her shoes, which just makes her feel kind of incompetent. Not to say that if you can't tie your shoes, you're stupid, but you should probably learn how to tie your shoes. But yeah, because her actions don't really line up with what the story's trying to portray her as, she ends up coming across as a bland and uninteresting character, and it makes her growth at the end of the movie not actually feel like growth and rather hollow. Imagine if in Legacy Day, rather than us seeing Apple constantly ignoring Raven's feelings about her destiny and pressuring her to be the evil queen, we were instead just told that she was selfish. That wouldn't really hit as hard as what we got, and it'd lead Apple to be a far less interesting character. While the film tries to portray Crystal as flawed, without her actions really demonstrating it, it leads to her arc and character as a whole not really resonating with me. Now, Crystal was my main gripe with this special, but I still have some more problems with it. The villains Jackie Frost and North Wind have weird motivations to me. They view the Snow King and Queen as wasting their power on fun and games.
All that power, and what do they do with it? Have fun? Blech! They deserve to have it stolen.
But this also goes unsupported by the narrative, as things at the top of the world are like fine. You could assume that perhaps the Snow King and Queen weren't treating their servants very well, or that the kingdom's gonna fall to ruin because they're playing around too much, but that's not the case. So rather than actually having understandable motives like other antagonists in the series, Jackie and Northwind just feel like generic bad guys. I do like Jackie's design though. The main plot of the special is the quest to find each of the 4 roses to cure the Snow King's curse. I like that the journey takes us to places we've never seen before, like the castles of Rosabella, Ashland, and Briar. We rarely, if at all, get to see the homes of the characters throughout the show, which is something I really wanted to see. In the Shannon Hale books, we get a peek into the characters' lives and the areas they grew up in. Raven's dark cliffside castle, and Cedar's kind village with Pinocchio and Geppetto. Using my imagination is cool and all, but I'm glad we actually got to see some of the characters' homes here. But unfortunately, the actual events of the quest were pretty uneventful. Jackie Frost and North Wind were there making obstacles along the way for everyone, but they weren't really anything that held them back that much. They overcame it all pretty quickly each time, so there wasn't much tension, and it led to me being pretty bored. There's also a really awkwardly placed musical sequence in the special. When the heroes arrive at Briar's castle, Jackie Frost and North Wind use the energy from the spindle to knock everyone out cold. In their slumber, it goes into a dream sequence where Crystal starts to sing the main song of the movie, Epic Winter. I can't play the song for copyright reasons. All of the specials from Way to Wonderland onward each had a special song to them. Way to Wonderland had Do You Wonder, and Dragon Games technically had Power Princess Shining Bright. While those specials had the songs and spots that felt sort of natural and didn't really interrupt the flow of the plot too much, the Epic Winter song just feels so tacked on in comparison. I mean, there's some fun visuals in it, but still, it just feels like the writers were like, oh yeah, we need to put the song in here somewhere, and then just kind of stuck it in that scene. Those are my main complaints. All that stuff really soured Epic Winter for me and held the film back from being any higher on this list, but there are some things that I really liked about it that put it above Spring Unsprung. Daring's arc hard carries this special. After the events of Dragon Games and learning he isn't Apple's Prince Charming, Daring is left feeling like he's without a purpose in his life, which drives him further into his vanity. Rosabella Beauty tries to help him see through this, but he continues to fall into self-obsession. This is until the Snow King turns him into a beast, and he's left without the good looks he cherishes so much. This takes him on a journey of learning to put others before himself, and it was really satisfying to see, and I enjoyed the moments between him and Rosabella. I've heard mixed opinions on the ship, but I think it's cute personally. Epic Winter's theme of calling back to the events of Dragon Games continues with Fabel Thorn, who's forced to clean the school as punishment for aiding the evil queen's rampage. As always, Fabel is an absolute loser and I love her for that. She tries to escape responsibility by calling up the fairy mob father to help clean the school for her, but she ends up getting indebted to them. So she spends the whole special going along with everyone's quest for the 4 roses in order to pay off her debt. She succeeds with doing this, but backs down as Daring takes on her debt for her, which the fairy mob father contract states that it gets rid of the debt entirely. I love how Fabel's conflict in this movie is born from her natural incompetence and general girl failureness. Though I do feel there should have been some type of consequence for her, as while Daring taking on her debt is a really good character moment for him, it kind of leads to Fabel getting off scot-free and not really learning anything. But I assume they had more in mind for Fabel later on that didn't occur because the show got cancelled, but oh well. Overall, Fabel's great. Live, laugh, love Fabel. Another part of this film that I really like are some of the comedic moments. For example, the look Cerise gave Beast Daring when he walked by her. Bro, she wants that man bad. There's also a little great sight gag of Fabel's anti-Apple and Raven posters in her locker. She's so petty, I love her. And of course, how could I talk about an Ever After High special without talking about the outfits? The Epic Winter outfits are mostly decent. I think Blondie and Fabel have the best looks out of everyone. Though for Briar, I feel hers is a little bit too heavy on the pink, but at the same time I've kind of warmed up to it, so I like hers too. Speaking of Fabel's outfit, it's actually a recolor of Apple's look, and that really makes me wonder why her and Maddie got specially designed outfits for this film when they're barely in it. It's like if in Great Scary Reef they gave like Cleo a special mermaid doll, but she doesn't actually go undersea with everyone. It's just very weird. So yeah, to wrap up, Epic Winter is pretty mediocre. I can respect the choice to focus on a character besides Apple or Raven, but Crystal Winter wasn't well developed enough to be able to fill their shoes, and her arc throughout the film didn't feel very satisfying. The villains Jackie Frost and Northwind's motivations didn't make much sense, and the overall quest the gang went on was pretty boring to watch. But the development that Daring gets in the special, his dynamic with Rosabella, and some funny shenanigans with Fabel were enough to put this special above Spring Unsprung. Now, I know this placement is going to be controversial. When I did a poll on my community tab to see what you all thought the best Ever After High special was, Way to Wonderland won, which really surprised me. I'm not big on this special, but I'll explain more why later. Let's recap the plot real quick. Lizzie Hartz receives an invitation from her mother's birthday, but can't go because the path to Wonderland is sealed off. But suddenly, Brooke Page informs the gang that Lizzie's mom is in danger from a coup, and Raven uses her magic to take everyone to Wonderland to save Lizzie's mom. I'm gonna start off with what I like about this special. I like that the plot of Way to Wonderland continues well from the last special. In Spring Unsprung, Alistair and Bunny discovered the storybook of legends discarded by Briar, so now our girls have to go to Wonderland and get the real book back, finally tying up the storyline that's been around since Thronecoming. Another cool addition to this movie that I really liked is an elaboration on Wonderland and the Evil Queen's curse. In flashback sequences, we get to see the Evil Queen place a curse on Wonderland, and Headmaster Grimm, Giles, and Baba Yaga sealing her into the mirror. This movie is also Evil Queen's first real appearance, and we get to see her design and hear her voice, which is really cool. Brooke Page plays a crucial role in this special, with her interference in the film's events helping out the protagonist greatly. Once again, Brooke is very charming. You can tell she cares a lot about the characters and wants to see them succeed, and I really liked her interactions with Maddie. The setting of Wonderland itself was also a plus. I really like how they portrayed the utter nonsensical nature of Wonderland, and I love all the nods to the characters from the Alice in Wonderland book. At the time of writing the script, I had just finished up American McGee's Alice and Alice Madness Returns, so I have even more of an appreciation for the Wonderland characters now than I did before. Shout out to my man the Cheshire Cat, he's always keeping it real.
And if not, there may be more than one way to skin a cat, if you'll pardon the expression.
Most unpleasant metaphor. Please avoid it in future.
Though, Wonderland as a setting isn't perfect, but I'll get to that later. Darling Charming, the younger sister to Dexter and Daring, makes her debut in the special. Just kidding, she was in Spring Unsprung as the White Knight. But not counting the webisodes, this is the first time we get to meet her without her alter ego. She's alright. Her aiding the gang was cool, and her fighting Chase Redford was pretty funny too. And of course, the reveal at the end that she's the White Knight was pretty obvious, but you know, it was still cool. The villain of the special, Courtly Jester, despite her ever-changing accent, was pretty entertaining too.
Was that little Lizzie Arts I just saw?
Mother, it's your precious little girl come home for your birthday.
I like how her motivations tie into meta rules about cards, and her fight with Raven was the highlight of the special. Seeing Raven finally get a hold of her powers and go full evil mode was really fun to see. Lastly, I like that we get to see more of Lizzie Hartz this time around. She had gotten a little more focused last special in Spring Unsprung, but not as much as she did here. The scene where she reunites with her mom was genuinely sweet. Like, it had me like, ah. Now onto the things that kept this movie from being higher on the list. In the beginning, Way to Wonderland set up some really interesting things to occur. A journey to Wonderland, stopping an attempted coup on the Queen of Hearts, recovering the Storybook of Legends, Raven finally getting a grasp on her powers, all incredible ideas. But the choice this special made to focus most of the time spent in Wonderland on a school setting really killed the momentum for me. The antics that the girls get up to inside Wonderland School weren't very entertaining to me or interesting, and during those segments I was pretty much just thinking, can we move on? The story built itself off the tension of, we have to save Lizzie's mom, but that sense of tension isn't really felt when the girls spend the middle portion of the special goofing off and doing random stuff like Unchess and the big teapot. It also kind of took away from a lot of the payoffs the film was trying to set up, like destroying the Storybook of Legends, Raven finally getting her powers, Briar's confession. Similar to Spring Unsprung, I feel Way to Wonderland really lacked the interesting character writing and conflicts that make me like Ever After High. It felt more like things were just happening and there wasn't much to connect to emotionally. I know these aren't very comparable stories, but I feel Shannon Hale's book, A Wonderlandful World, was a far more entertaining and emotional story involving the Wonderland characters than this special, and did a lot of things right that this film did wrong. Go read the Shannon Hale books, by the way, they're very good. Another issue I have with this special is the Wonderland Curse. We're told that the Wonderland Curse was so severe that the Grimm brothers had to seal the land off from Ever After to avoid it spreading. But once Raven, Apple, and everyone arrive in Wonderland, everything seems completely fine. I don't think they should have built up the Wonderland Curse like there was a big deal if it had no real effect on the story. But by far my biggest problem with Way to Wonderland's story is its resolving of the Royal Rebel conflict. The idea of everyone coming together to recognize the flaws of the Destiny system is a great idea, but the execution here felt weird. It felt rather random for this to be the special where that happens. Apple mentions how Courtly almost stealing Lizzie's destiny proves that the Storybook of Legends is too much trouble for what it's worth, and I can understand that, but the destruction of the Storybook of Legends completely removes the central conflict and question of the franchise. The whole of Ever After High was built on Royals versus Rebels, conformity versus tradition, fate versus choice.
Are you a Royal or a Rebel?
Choose your own Ever After.
Get online and vote!
But now that the Storybook of Legends isn't a factor anymore, it left the franchise feeling kind of aimless going forward, and it didn't seem like Ever After High fully knew what it wanted to be after that. From this special onward, Ever After High rebranded to be more about girl power and being a powerful princess.
Where princesses are powerful, and where princesses are powerful.
It will be an adventure full of magic and powerful princesses.
And I just feel that message isn't as universal or really authentic as the message of choosing who you want to be and deciding your own future. Overall, I just feel that destroying the Storybook of Legends was a mistake to do in this special. Man, I'm starting to wonder, should I have even put this above Epic Winter? Yeah, I've come too far now. This also ties into the handling of Briar's character. I absolutely loved what was done with Briar's character in Thronecoming with her throwing away the Storybook of Legends. Spring Unsprung didn't really follow up on how Briar felt, but I could excuse it at the time because I thought they were going to cook with that reveal in this special. But the talk between Apple, Raven, and Briar at the end of this movie just felt pretty anticlimactic. Like it wasn't giving the proper time to be satisfying. I just find it disappointing because that was a major moment for Briar, and after this, she doesn't really do much else for the rest of the show, but you could really say that for a lot of characters after Thronecoming, so I almost forgot to talk about the Way to Wonderland outfits. I'm not a big fan. I like Maddie's the most. I feel like hers fits her. Lizzie's is kind of good too, and Apple's has started to grow on me. But the rest of them, no. To wrap up, I feel that Way to Wonderland is a mixed bag. It has a far better cast of characters to work with than Epic Winter, and feels a bit more focused than Spring Unsprung. I think the first act does a really great job of setting up the plot and the driving forces for the special, and the third act is a mostly solid conclusion. But the second act's focus on Wonderland School completely lost me and had me bored. I wish I could like this film as much as everyone else does, but for me, Way to Wonderland was just mid. Yeah, this placement might get me cooked as well. The top 4 on this list are the ones I would consider to be genuinely good, and True Hearts Day is no exception. I feel that it's super underrated by the fandom. Quick summary. One day, Cupid uncovers a lost holiday in Ever After called True Hearts Day and plans to bring back the occasion without Headmaster Grimm's permission. Meanwhile, there's trouble in paradise for Ashlyn and Hunter when Duchess Swan discovers their secret romance. I feel it might be controversial for me to put this special above Way to Wonderland, but I have 2 main reasons for doing so. For one, I feel this special is paced far better than Way to Wonderland. You might be thinking, well, since True Hearts Day is shorter than Way to Wonderland, it should naturally be better paced, and I disagree. Way to Wonderland's 84-minute runtime is second in length to Dragon Games and Epic Winter's 100 minutes. And while I didn't really like Epic Winter, Dragon Games didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome like Way to Wonderland. Just like Dragon Games, True Hearts Day kept me entertained the whole way throughout, and I didn't feel the urge to do something else while watching. Second, I think the special has far better character conflicts and drama than the previous entries on this list. This special is Ashlyn and Hunter's big showing. Ashlyn and Hunter are basically a 2-pack in my eyes. Whenever they're separated, they're usually less interesting, but together they're pretty cute. I like how this film tests their relationship, with the threat of Duchess outing them to the school. This can very well be read as an allegory to queer relationships in some ways, and I really respect Ever After High for having theming like this. They eventually come around to sharing the secret themselves, removing any power Duchess had over them. But that brings us to the next struggle they face, Apple.
It's Apple White!
I feel this special isn't talked about enough when it comes to Apple's arc and development. Apple is pretty opposed to Ashlyn and Hunter's relationship. They're royal and rebel, and that's not right in her eyes. This pressure causes Ashlyn to break off her relationship with Hunter. While this is what Apple wanted, she's slowly beginning to realize the holes in her ideology. Her ideas of wanting everyone to stick to their destiny doesn't just affect the rebels, but they also affect the royals, her friends. In Legacy Day, Apple did know that Raven would be negatively impacted by her destiny, but Apple couldn't fully empathize with her because she was still putting her happily ever after first. Raven was a part of her story, so there was a barrier of understanding between them. But now that she's seeing her ideology negatively impact her friend who has nothing to do with her story, she's starting to see that perhaps she could be wrong. Apple apologizes to Ashlyn and Hunter, and now supports their relationship. I feel the development Apple got here is crucial for her coming to understand Raven's point of view later on. This special has a fun antagonist in the form of Duchess Swan. She's sort of a darker parallel to Raven. Both of their stories end with them suffering and miserable, but rather than seeking to break free of the system like Raven, Duchess Swan instead aims to game the system by stealing the destinies of other royals. And that's exactly what motivates her to go after Ashlyn, who she thinks will lose her spot as a royal if her relationship with Hunter is exposed. But like the girl failure that Duchess is, her plan fails when Ashlyn and Hunter own their relationship. Gotta say, the scene where she approaches Ashlyn at her shop genuinely made me laugh out loud.
Hi, Ashlyn.
Duchess reminds me of Fabel, and y'all know how I feel about Fabel. I like that Duchess ends up facing consequences for her actions and ends up having detention for meddling and everything. Duchess was a great addition to this special. So I've done a lot of praising of this special so far, but there are 3 specials higher than it. What gives? Well, this is where I get to my main complaint about True Hearts Day.
Anyone sitting here?
I do not like Dexter Charming's plotline. Now, I think his and Raven's romance is cute. I like the idea, but absolutely nothing changes for them in this special. Dexter starts the film nervous and scared to confess to Raven. That's good. He gets advice from Cupid to write her a letter, but signs the letter with D Charming rather than his full name. This leads to Raven thinking it's from Daring, which is another problem I have. Raven never seemed like the type to be into someone as vain and arrogant as Daring. But yeah, Raven finds out it was actually Dexter, so now she knows. But Dexter ends the film once more, scared and nervous to confess to Raven, exactly where he started off. While Raven knowing does move things along a little, it was annoying seeing Dexter end the special in the exact place he started. I know they eventually go on a date in season 3, but the show barely acknowledges their relationship most of the time in between this special and that date. Overall, True Heart's Day is a pretty underrated special. It doesn't hit the highs of the specials above it on this list, but it has a pretty good conflict that gives Ashlyn and Hunter some spotlight, a fun antagonist in Duchess, and more development for Apple's character. The only blight of this special is Dexter's plotline not really progressing in any way, and just leaving Dexter with no character other than having a crush on Raven. You know, it's kind of funny that Dexter has the same problems as Cupid, where their entire character just centers on their romantic feelings for another character. That's why I didn't really talk about Cupid that much, is how many times can we see her get sad over Dexter not liking her back? But yeah, True Heart's Day is pretty good. You know, they say the number 3 is a number that humanity loves, and I love Legacy Day. This is where everything began in Ever After High. Released on May 30th, 2013. I didn't get into Ever After High until December 2023 myself, but over 10 years later, these episodes still really hold up. I have a whole lot of positive things to say about it, but one crucial negative that keeps it from being any higher. Let's get into it. Starting from the very beginning, the opening hook itself is really good. We see Raven at a podium with a nervous look on her face. She's in front of a big crowd and clearly uncomfortable. To contrast, Apple is right behind her, egging her on to sign the book, and we see the stern glare of Headmaster Grimm adding on to that pressure. It's clear that Raven is the underdog in this scenario, making the audience empathize with her very quickly, but it also raises many questions. Why doesn't she want to pledge? Why is the girl behind her so keen on getting her to do so? Why is the old dude looking at her so sternly? All of these questions make the audience intrigued and drive them to keep watching, and I certainly did. Legacy Day also does a fantastic job of introducing us to the core cast. We get to know the general vibe of everyone pretty well. Raven is the good-intentioned daughter of the evil queen, Apple the perfect picture princess daughter of Snow White, Madeline Hatter the kooky daughter of the Mad Hatter, and so on. This characterization is also helped by the use of leitmotifs that further help to accentuate the vibes of the characters. My favorites are Maddie's, whose motif is wild and wacky, and Cedar's, which makes use of wooden instruments like the marimba, xylophone, and woodblocks. Going back to our main characters, Apple and Raven are absolutely great in their roles. They contrast each other well not only in their designs, but in their goals. Raven wants to prove she's not like her mother, the evil queen, and to live on her own terms. But Apple wants Raven to be exactly like her mother in order to secure her happily ever after in the Snow White tale. This clashing of goals creates tension that drives forward the rest of the series and allows the audience to decide on their own who's right, royal or rebel. Apple and Raven's conflict comes to a head in the Legacy Day episode itself, where Raven decides to choose her own destiny. You go, girl! Besides episodes focused directly on Legacy Day itself, we have other episodes that are fun adventures with the sidecast or introduce them to the audience. Just to list the standouts for me, Starkraven Mad sees Headmaster Grimm holding an intervention for Raven to help push her towards following her evil destiny, and it has some pretty funny moments.
Everyone, I set up a bungee jumping platform on the east turret.
Briar, hocus focus!
We haven't heard from Lizzie Hartz.
Off with the head!
The other day, you spilled that everlasting black ink all over my new ball gown. That was an accident. I felt really bad and said I was sorry like 100 times.
You're not supposed to apologize. You're evil.
True Reflections has Raven breaking Apple's mirror and trying to cover it up.
BRB!
Just kidding, the video isn't over. Maddie in Chief has Maddie run for student council president and features this awful but hilarious Raven quote.
You
drives Royal Blah and Royal Blah and Royal Na Na Na.
Here Comes Cupid makes the interesting decision to bring Cupid over from Monster High to the world of Ever After. A very bold decision that raises a lot of questions that the show didn't really answer. I had watched all of Monster High before I watched Ever After High, and I was like, wait, is that Cupid? But in retrospect, it was kind of wasted potential because all she does is crush on Dexter. The Cat Who Cried Wolf focuses on the GOAT, Cerise Hood, whose secret is accidentally revealed to Kitty Cheshire, who tries to expose her, but Raven puts a stop to that mess. Cedar Wood Would Love to Lie, try saying that 5 times fast, shows our beloved puppet girl needing to come up with a tall tale, which is hard for her since she can't lie. But fortunately, she stumbles upon Ashlyn and Hunter on a date. To avoid exposing their relationship, she shoves peanuts in her mouth while blabbing about it in order to cover it up. Live, laugh, love, Cedar. And finally, probably my favorite episode of the bunch, Replacing Raven, which features one of the 3 little piggies trying to sub in for Raven as the evil queen, but he's not really great at the whole evil thing. There's a lot of great clips that come from this episode.
I heard you're trying to find an evil replacement to make me happy. That is so mean.
Now that I've covered most of the episodes, let's get to the meat of this arc, and the titular event, Legacy Day. The actual coverage of Legacy Day is where most of my complaints begin. For one, while I know that both Raven and Apple are supposed to be equally right in the Royal v Rebel conflict, I don't really think the show does a good job at showing that to be the case. Headmaster Grimm tells Raven that if she doesn't sign, she and everyone involved in her story will go poof. From this information, this makes the royal side of the argument seem far more reasonable. No one wants to disappear forever because of someone else's actions, right? But the problem is that they don't actually substantiate that fear. To draw a comparison to the books, Shannon Hale's Storybook of Legends features Apple and Raven actually discovering a girl who didn't sign, Bella's sister. They go on her quest to her last known location, and they end up stumbling upon a skeleton, but it's left ambiguous as to whether this is actually Bella's sisters. This gives a lot more leverage to both sides and adds a lot more tension to Raven deciding not to sign. The skeleton was probably planted by Headmaster Grimm, but ignore that. Related to signing and not signing, I also feel the show failed to make Apple's motivation very understandable. In these episodes, Apple's motivation is entirely tied to getting her happily ever after. She even states it herself.
Because she's such an important part of my story. When she poisons me, it changes everything. Then the prince can wake me, and I become queen. That's when I get my happily ever after. I need her. This
makes it seem like Apple doesn't truly care about Raven, which is the main reason why people watching the show didn't like her at first. The show kind of runs with the "what about my happily ever after" motivation for Apple for a good while, but doesn't really go any deeper than that. So as a result, she just seems entirely selfish. To once more compare to Shannon Hale's book, Apple's motivation to get her happily ever after is because she's desperately afraid of uncertainty. This was caused by her nearly drowning as a kid when she fell in a well. Her happily ever after provides a direct path for her life to go down. Absolute security. So while Apple's actions may seem a bit selfish, because we can understand her reasoning for why she does what she does, it makes her seem far less of a jerk in comparison to the show version of Apple. This isn't to hate on Apple, by the way. I think she's a great character that often gets unnecessarily hated on by the fandom, but I feel Legacy Day should have put more focus on her. Most of the Legacy Day episodes focus on Raven's struggles and follow things from that point of view. Meanwhile, Apple is viewed from a lens of Raven's perspective. Storybook of Legends fixed this problem by giving Apple and Raven an equal amount of focus. Both of their characters felt fleshed out, and they spent a lot more time building their friendship, which made the fallout on Legacy Day hit even harder. I'd really recommend you all read these books actually, they're really good. They complement the show very well. Well, not exactly in terms of events, because after the first book they start to do their own thing plot-wise, but it provides a lot of characterization for the characters that you otherwise wouldn't get in the show. But I don't want to sound like I'm holding that against the show. The difference in format from a short-form web series to a 200-ish page book allows for a lot more character exploration and relationship building. So while I wish that the show's version of Legacy Day had handled Apple's character better, I can understand that they lacked the time to do so. So to wrap up, I like Legacy Day. It does a good job introducing us to the world and central conflict of Ever After High. The characters are fun, and the reimaginings of popular fairy tales are very creative. But my main problem with this arc is that it lacked the proper time to develop certain aspects of the narrative, like the consequences of Raven not signing, Apple's motivation, and the overall friendship between Raven and Apple. But despite those faults, I still think it's a great introduction to the series, and it's what got me to love the show. Dragon Games. This special was by far the hardest to gather my thoughts on. While I knew the general placement of where I wanted every other special, Dragon Games I was kind of unsure on. Initially I didn't think too highly of it, but after my rewatch and discussion with people on the special, I even consulted some of you in my community tab, I feel that Dragon Games is a pretty great special. Quick summary of the plot. Following the events of Way to Wonderland, Raven's got a newfound grasp on her powers, and it's made her more popular at school, something Apple's not too keen on. Using Apple's newfound jealousy, the evil queen breaks out of the mirror and kickstarts the Dragon Games once more. I've yet to talk about the animation of Ever After High at all in this video yet, but man, it's incredible, especially here in this special. The character acting and everyday scenes are already well animated, check out this Fable dance, but the action sequences are absolutely stellar. Shout out to the team at Studio Guru for cooking a full course meal with the dragon riding scenes at the end. They deserve all the praise in the world. I feel Dragon Games makes good use of most of its characters, including its antagonist, the Evil Queen. I think the choice to have the Evil Queen as the villain of the special was a great one. She's been built up since Legacy Day as a major threat, and is the closest thing this series has to a central antagonist. Well, besides Headmaster Grimm, but the story never went that way. So when we finally see the Evil Queen break free of the mirror, it's this moment of, oh, that's not good. But surprisingly, the Evil Queen doesn't do anything too bad right off the bat. Her first and foremost concern is Raven. Using her disguise form of Mira Shards, which is a great name by the way, she hangs out with Raven and gets to hear how she truly feels about her. This whole segment of the film where she's in disguise is probably my favorite material she's gotten besides the Shannon Hale books, and it really helped me to understand her motivations more. Of course, she does enjoy being evil, but what's it without her daughter? And while she does love Raven in her own way, she oftentimes views her more of an extension of herself rather than an actual person with thoughts and feelings. Both her and Snow White have this in common, and it's funny how they butt heads despite being so similar in their attitudes and treatments of their daughters. And I do like the resolution of how the Evil Queen comes to respect Raven for defying her, but she's still adamant on Raven following in her footsteps. Moving on, Daring is absolutely hilarious in the special. His vanity is a little played up compared to normal, but I still found him to be entertaining, and watching him lose his mind inside the mirror prison was hilarious. An incredible moment for him here that sets up his arc in Epic Winter is him finally getting to kiss Apple. This is what his whole life is built up to, his moment to be a knight in shining armor, and he fails.
I should have run far away. To a place where nobody has even heard of the Evil Queen.
I don't think there is such a place, unless maybe wherever monsters come from or something. But who ever heard of a Monster High? Sorry.
It was a really interesting decision for the writers to make, and I loved the direction his character went in Epic Winter. Who else do I talk about? Fable Thorn! I love Fable in this special. She gets a lot of character focus here as she goes under the Evil Queen's wing as her lackey. I absolutely love how much of a dork she is around the Evil Queen. Her lock screen got a good laugh out of me. I'll always love how much of a girl failure Fable is, so her antics were entertaining in this film. Live, laugh, love Fable. Darling Charming features heavily in this film too. I like the way she was utilized, reviving Apple, which is probably the most impactful thing she's done. She was really about business in this film. This kind of transitions into my negatives though with Dragon Games, as her sudden importance in the group feels weird. Darling had existed in the books for a while, but she only really became a proper character in the last special. But this film makes it seem like she's been a part of the squad forever. Speaking of the books, did you know that she could slow down time? Yeah, it's crazy. Am I forgetting oh yeah, I should probably talk about the Dappling Kiss. The Darling Apple Kiss caught me off guard when I first watched this special. Ever After High has been pretty heavy with themes analogous to queerness before, but it had no actual queer characters to be seen. So for them to have Darling turn out to be Apple's Prince Charming and kiss her was pretty cool. I know some people will say, it was CPR, come on guys! But that's such a bad faith argument, I'm gonna ignore it. It's a shame they never properly followed up on this thread. Epic Winter focused more on how Daring felt about his destiny rather than either Apple or Darling's feelings about it. Not that that's a negative, as I don't doubt they were going to explore that in future, but the show got cancelled. That's all of my main positives out of the way, so let me get to the character I've been putting off talking about this whole time, Applewhite. The handling of Apple's character in this special is something I've been very back and forth on while writing this video. On one hand, I can understand that the pressure from Snow White and the influence of the Evil Queen caused Apple to act negatively. Her actions make sense. But on the other hand, something about it just didn't sit right with me. Because of this, I consulted some of you, my viewers, on a community post and discussed Apple's character in this special, and I think I found the reason why I don't like how she was written in Dragon Games. I find that Apple's regression here doesn't feel like it was justified enough by the story. Raven's new powers apparently threaten Apple's popularity, but we're only shown one scene of Apple not being able to help someone because Raven is instead. The popularity thing also wasn't something established to be important to Apple before. Sure, she was popular, but it's not like she was big on, that being her thing. And I've seen many versions of the Snow White story, but being popular was never really inherent to that tale. Of course, changes can be made, and the show has made changes to the fairy tales, but since they want to make it such a big part of Apple's motivation to act out against Raven here, it's something they should have established better in my opinion. Now, to address a counter-argument, you could say that Apple's turn here was a result of compounded feelings that came from the end of Way to Wonderland. With the Storybook of Legends gone, Apple's probably not sure how she's gonna get her happily ever after anymore. These feelings combined with being lost and the pressure from her mother are the perfect recipe to get the Evil Queen to take advantage of her. And it really does make sense that Apple takes the bait. The Evil Queen practically serves up what she's been wanting on a platter for her. And this would have worked if it weren't for the last special Way to Wonderland having Apple directly acknowledge that she doesn't want Raven to be evil.
I know I always wanted you to become your mom, but now, I just don't think it's in you. Your heart is just too good. The decision is yours, Raven. It always has been.
So having this turn here feels like it's not really regressing her growth, but rather resetting it in order to make the conflict happen. So my main problem with Apple here isn't the fact of regression itself, but rather that they didn't really push Apple enough, I feel, to get her to act like this in the first place, considering all the growth she had before. If there had been more time spent in the beginning on Apple and her mom and her struggles, I probably would have been okay with it and not have been talking about it here. But that just relates to a problem I brought up in Legacy Day and my overall biggest critique of the show. The show tends to focus a lot more on Raven's point of view than Apple's. Raven's scene meeting her mom felt like it had been given the time it needed and established Raven's motivations going into the rest of the special. But Apple's meeting with Snow White at the start was short and didn't really have the time to breathe or put enough pressure on Apple in order for her to act how she does in the film. There's also some lines Apple has that just are really bad, that feel really weird for her to say after the development she's had throughout the show.
She promised me my happily ever after. And not just for me, for you too, for all of us. Everything went wrong. This is not how I thought high school would be.
What kind of friend refuses to listen?
I just want our happily ever after.
Overall, while I get what the writers were trying to do with Apple's regression here, and I'm not against the fact that they did that, but I don't feel they spent enough time or did the right things to properly push Apple into acting out like that. And in turn, it felt like they just erased the development she had the specials prior. The rest of my critiques are mainly little things. I find it weird how okay the citizens of Ever After are with the Evil Queen being set free. Keep in mind that speaking the very name of the Evil Queen in the past was enough to turn heads and widen eyes. Her poisoning Wonderland caused it to be sealed off and displaced Maddie, Lizzie, Kitty, the Mad Hatter, and the White Queen. Raven was ostracized for being the Evil Queen's daughter, and everyone believed she'd be just like her. But now with her out of Mirror Prison, the most reaction she gets is a few shocked gasps, but then all of a sudden everyone's cool with her being around. Even the Wonderlandians, which is just odd to me. And my final complaint, I feel like Apple should have faced more consequences for freeing the Evil Queen. Sure, she did go into the poison sleep, but that's kind of what she's been gunning for this whole series, so I wouldn't really consider that a punishment. And with how heavily Fabel was punished in Epic Winter for helping the Evil Queen out, you'd think there'd be more that Apple would get herself. But you can probably track this to Headmaster Grimm picking favorites and letting her off the hook. But despite those negatives, I still think Dragon Games is a great special. It has a great antagonist in the form of the Evil Queen, stellar animation throughout, fun utilization of the characters, the Dappling Kiss, and a great conflict between Raven, Apple, and their mothers that kind of feels like a bookend to the show. except it wasn't because Epic Winter came out after. But the main thing keeping this from the #1 spot is the awkward handling of Apple's character regression. Still a great time though, and Dragon Games definitely deserves the #2 spot.
That's not how the story goes, Apple. Not this chapter, anyway. You can't be on both sides.
I'm sure some of you saw this coming from a mile away, but I can't help it. Thronecoming is my favorite Ever After High special, and it's where the series peaked for me. Quick recap of the plot for those unaware. It's the day of Thronecoming at Ever After High, and everyone's excited, except for Raven though, who after some pressuring from Headmaster Grimm and Apple, finally decides to sign the Storybook of Legends, but just before she can, Cedar Wood discovers it's a fake, and the girls have to go in search of the real Storybook of Legends. To me, Ever After High is at its best and most interesting when it's focusing on conflicts between characters, and I feel Thronecoming has the best character writing of all the specials. Let's start out with Miss Applewhite. I like what was done with Apple in this special. Initially, Apple was unable to understand Raven's point of view of not wanting to sign because even though they were friends, their stories being connected clouded her judgment. But like in True Heart's Day, Apple's royal ideology is tested by her friends having to suffer because of their destinies, this time with Briar. Their argument shows Apple that while she says everyone has their part to play, there are clearly those who will benefit far more from following their destiny than others. This conflict leads to Apple coming to understand Briar, and by extension, Raven too. I also like how this special makes Apple's motives seem a bit more reasonable. Previously, Apple just talked about how she wanted Raven to sign because she wanted her happy ending. But now, she talks about how others were put in danger by Raven's choice not to sign, which makes her seem far less selfish than she did previously.
I want you to sign it so that nothing bad happens to the people that I love, including you. If you ask me, you're the one who's being selfish.
This brings us to the next character, Raven. I like the little introspection arc Raven got in this special. While I side with Raven and supported her not signing on Legacy Day, Thronecoming feels like a proper follow-up to that event, as it's questioning whether Raven was really as noble as she seemed back then. This doubt combined with some tampering from Headmaster Grimm, I'll talk about him later, even pushes her to almost sign the Storybook of Legends at the Thronecoming parade. Not that it would have mattered cause it's a fake, but it goes to show how Raven is willing to sacrifice herself if her friends are in danger. The reveal of the Storybook of Legends being fake was also a really cool lore drop. It added a lot of intrigue to the story and tied it into the Evil Queen plot very well, and Briar dropping it down the well was a great cliffhanger. And now we get to the best character in this special, Briar. Before Thronecoming, I did not think much of Briar. She was just Apple's party-going friend with the same voice actress as Frankie, but I feel the writers really fleshed her out here and made her a much more interesting character than before. After falling asleep and missing the Thronecoming preparations, Briar starts to reflect on how bad her destiny actually is. Sleeping for 100 years, missing out on all the fun, and not getting to see her friends. Because of all this, we can totally understand why she chose to throw away the Storybook of Legends at the end of the film. Though I might not like how that plotline was wrapped up in the end, I still absolutely love this cliffhanger. Briar's newfound development also leads to the best scene of Thronecoming and arguably all of Ever After High, her argument with Apple. Briar's been pretty concretely on the royal side, kind of being the counterpart to Maddie in terms of being a best friend to Apple. But in the dress preparation scene, we get to see Briar finally voice her frustrations about her destiny with some hard-hitting lines.
Is that how you guys see me? Just a party girl? I don't want to sleep because I'm gonna lose all my friends. I'm gonna be alone. How do you think that feels?
Briar, we all have our part to play.
Easy for you to say, Apple. You get poisoned for what, like a week?
It's cathartic to see Apple finally getting called out for how much she was gushing over Raven signing. Just when she thought she flipped a rebel, her best friend steps in to fill those shoes. I also like how this scene is kind of meta. All of the other girls just think Briar is upset about having to sleep for 100 years only because she won't be able to party. It's really neat because the audience may have had those same thoughts about Briar prior to this special. Shoot, I did myself. It's almost like she's calling out the audience directly, and I think that's really cool. It's impressive how much Briar was developed in just one special, and that contributed to me putting this at #1. To continue with my gushing about Thronecoming, the outfits. They are absolutely fantastic and probably my favorite group line the series ever did. Cupid, Apple, and Briar's looks are my favorites, but the rest are still really good. No misses at all in my opinion. I'd also like to praise the journey into the storybook. It was a unique and fun concept for the girls to go into each other's stories, and I like some of the switches they did. Blondie ending up in Maddie's tale is funny because she could easily be mistaken for an Alice character at first, and I kind of did that when I was starting the show. Briar seeing Raven's story further complicates her feelings on Destiny. Apple pricking her finger on Briar's spindle gives her reasons firsthand why Briar wouldn't want to go through with her destiny. And Raven taking Apple's role shows her what Apple's destiny really entails. And through the visage of the old witch, what she might become. Speaking of Apple being in Briar's tale, Briar saving her from that weird tree demon thing was very random but very cool. I wasn't expecting it at all, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't fire. That about caps off the gushing I'll do about Thronecoming. Time to put on my nerd goggles and be negative. So the main complaint I have with Thronecoming, which isn't super major, is how they try to make Headmaster Grimm seem sympathetic. Throughout the special we get these flashbacks into Milton's childhood, seeing him and his brother Giles explore a cave. Milton brings Giles into the cave against his brother's wishes, waving off his warnings as just a story. Of course, turns out the story is real, and Milton runs out the cave, leaving his brother behind. His father returns with Giles, and Milton vows to never not follow a story again. This explains his motivations for making everyone follow their destiny, but the story treats it like some major tragic thing to happen to Milton, when this is the same guy who locked his brother up in an underground library and put a Riddler's curse on him. Am I supposed to feel bad for this dude? The story also tries to play it like, oh no, something really bad happens to Giles, when we know he's alive and well in the library. I get that it was to build up Giles and Milton's reunion at the end, but it just felt kinda weak. My next and final complaint about Thronecoming is the bookball subplot. Cerise wants to play on the bookball team, but she can't because she's a girl and only boys can play sports. But the guys are struggling and Daring does accept her help, and Cerise proves that, maybe girls can play ball too. Now, I'm not against the message of female empowerment in sports, and I think it's a good lesson to teach kids, but I just feel the story doesn't really do anything unique or put a spin on the story at all. It's beat for beat exactly the type of things these stories usually do, but not done in any interesting or new way. And then at the dance after, Daring and Cerise have a ship tease moment, and I'm just like, bro, what? Cerise, I guess you're not as incapable and bad at sports as I thought. I guess women can play ball after all. Like, no hate if you love this ship. I actually like the little link towards it in Epic Winter, but I just can't get behind this moment at all. But yeah, those are my only complaints out of the way. The Headmaster Grimm flashbacks are pretty weak, and so is the bookball plot with Daring and Cerise. But the rest of Thronecoming is absolutely great, with excellent character development for Briar, a heartfelt conflict between the cast, and a great expansion on the story's lore with the fake storybook of legends. To me, this special is where Ever After High's show peaked for me. None of the other specials after this could really match up to the writing of Thronecoming, and for this, I believe it's fairly worthy of the #1 spot. Now that we've finished, let's recap the ranking. Number 7, Spring Unsprung. Number 6, Epic Winter. Number 5, Way 2 Wonderland. Number 4, True Hearts Day. Number 3, Legacy Day. Number 2, Dragon Games. Number 1, Thronecoming. If you've made it all the way to the end of this video, I'd like to thank you for watching. Like always, this was a lot of fun to make. It was nice revisiting the Ever After High show and getting to share my thoughts on all the specials. I've also been revisiting the Shannon Hale books, as if it wasn't obvious enough based off how much I talked about them. But I think I might talk about those too at some point. I originally planned to make this video all the way back in September, but college put me through the ringer for like 3 months. In keeping with how my channel started out by covering the G1 movies, the web series, and then G2's media, I think it's time for me to finally tackle G3. And I'll begin that journey in the next video with the review of Nickelodeon's 2022 movie, Monster High the Movie. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to catch the next video right as it comes out. And leave a comment too discussing which Ever After High special is your favorite. or if you hate my opinions and think I suck. Thanks for watching, and stay spooky.
BRB!